Folks, happy Friday and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson and I'm here with my co-host.
And good morning, good afternoon. Todd Peterson here. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey. You know, guys, there's a ton going on in the world. We're cascading to World War III. We can't get a Republican Speaker of the House. Everything seems to be kittywampus right now. And it was funny because Todd and I, as we were talking, we're like, what do we talk about this week? We do this once a week, and we're doing this podcast to help open people's eyes, right, left, center. Government's corrupt. How do we help show people how crazy this stuff is? And Todd, what did we land on for a topic this week?
This is the tried and true government lies. And so we can talk about the lies even coming out of today, for example, with the narrative around voting for a House Speaker, not voting for a House Speaker. We've seen that shift dramatically since January and today. We're going to go through some of Joe Biden's latest comments on the jobs report and inflation reports because, Jason, you and I are sitting here, and I know viewers out there are watching, and they're saying, what I'm hearing from my leadership right now is not the experience I'm having. So we're going to go through some of the lies that the government is promoting here. The media certainly promotes as well. We have some housing market information to cover. We got to talk about what constitutes an insurrection now, because, again, what we saw a couple of Januaries ago and this past week, that doesn't line up. So how do we square those circles here? And then, of course, we have Scott Adams' infamous Trump hoax list. If we have time to get to that, it's always fun to run down how Donald Trump was accused of one thing that didn't turn out to be the case. And so lots of good hoaxes, lots of good lies to debunk today for you all.
Oh, yeah. And before we get going, too, I just want to give a shout out to our folks. So Todd and I, for those who don't know, we're two normal dudes from Minnesota. We a year ago, we were sick of our corporate jobs. We said, what can we do to help try to make our little difference in the world? And so we started our website, theamericantribune.com, and it's designed to just share some fun conservative stories. We cover anything from politics to sports to whatnot. And as our business continued to evolve, we launched our American Tribune Substack, where that's where we talk about things like Epstein client lists, and that's where we have our subscription service. If you like what we do and want an easy way to support our work, you can go on there. We're actually up to 1,800 subscribers on our Substack, Todd, which is awesome. And so a couple months ago, we said, hey, we're going to do a podcast. And we're going to put our ugly mugs on the internet, and maybe nobody watches it. Maybe a few people watch. And now we've got a YouTube channel, a Rumble channel. We stream it on some social media pages, our Twitter pages. And actually, we just went on Apple Podcasts for those who like audio podcasts. So just from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys for supporting our work. And, one thing everybody can do is share it. And, subscribe to our work, give us a share to help get the word out. Hopefully the information we share with you finds valuable. And I got to say, it's some of these topics we come up with are from chats or emails or notes we get from our subscribers saying hey, I want to know more about this, or I want to know more about that. But Todd, any thoughts on that?
We're talking about government lies here. I recall Hillary Clinton testifying in front of the Senate a couple years ago, talking about, at this point, what does it matter, when we were trying to get to the root of Benghazi. The latest Substack article covers Hillary Clinton, Muammar Gaddafi, and what happened in Libya there. It's a fascinating read from our writer, Will. Encourage you to check that out. There's some really great stuff in there. And again, like I said, it all ties back. I think this is that nice umbrella topic of debunking government lies, because you hear so much out there, and then it turns out that that's never really the case. And we could even point to the hospital case, right? There's just so many stories that didn't even make our agenda today, but there's just so much out there that we're trying to unpeel, get the layers back, and just bring the truth to y'all.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about the hospital thing. I mean, with what's going on in Gaza, it's terrible, but you can't even get the real story out of that. At one point, the hospital was blown up, and then they were fighting over who did it. Now it turns out that the hospital wasn't even blow up, and it's just insane how backwards it is. Now, permission before we get going, Todd, to give an analogy for kind of what we're going to talk about today.
I don't have my Picard meme up there, but permission granted.
Permission granted. All right. So, folks, here's how I describe what happens with the media and the government to people that don't understand. Most everybody watching this show has heard of football. Todd, you've heard of NFL football, right?
Once or twice.
Some people know everything about football, every position, every team, every coach, every player. Some people just know football's a game that usually is played on Sunday. Everybody understands a little bit about it. Now, if you ever want to pull a hoax over on somebody, you take somebody that doesn't know anything about football and you say, hey, Todd, play along with me. Minnesota Vikings, they are one of the greatest NFL teams ever, aren't they?
Oh, they're the best. They've won so many Super Bowls.
That they have been to 4 Super Bowls and they have a perfect record.
The Purple People Eaters. I know about that too, right?
Right. Now, if you don't know anything about football, what you just heard me say is that they were a great team. They've been to 4 Super Bowls and they're undefeated. But that's not what I said. What I said is they have a perfect record. Now, their perfect record is 0-4. They've never won a Super Bowl. And if you're a lifelong Minnesota fan, which we are, they're probably never going to win a Super Bowl. But we didn't lie to you. But somebody who doesn't know what's going on is going to go away from that conversation and think, oh, you know what? The Vikings, yeah, they're the greatest Super Bowl team ever. They have a perfect Super Bowl record. Well, they must be undefeated. And that's how the government lies to you. They take these topics that you understand a little bit about tangentially, and then they spin facts. And if you don't actually dig into them, you're like, you come away with a completely different assessment of what it actually is. And that's like, we're 2 nerds. We watch C-SPAN, we read government reports, we actually dig into this stuff. And that's what we're going to try to do, is we're going to try to explain some of this stuff in English. And like, what does this really mean? And how's the government screwing you? So,
and Jason, just on that point there, I was telling my wife the other day, watching some of these C-SPAN videos, it is pretty incredible when you watch the videos and you hear what's happening in those meetings. It's pretty astounding, the truth that gets revealed. And then you go click on any major website and you don't see that getting reported. And so it's not even like the politicians in this case are hiding a lot of what's going on there. We have a great video we can show of Josh Hawley just exposing the corruption about Biden officials getting paid to go speak at meetings from these lobbyists that have an interest in getting a loan from the very loan director that got paid to speak, for example. This is all out there, but you're not going to see reports on that stuff there. And so there's a lot of deception, a lot of hiding of what's going on. In some cases, there's not. It's right out there, but the media is not going to choose to cover that. So that's our job to hopefully bring it to you all.
Yeah, actually, we just we've got that video scheduled today on our Facebook page, Freedom from the Press, and that was a funny one. Like we were looking through some C-SPAN stuff, and it's literally what department was the guy from again, Todd?
Department of Energy or Department of Labor, I believe.
Yeah, Department of Labor. And Josh Hawley's talking to him, and he says, so let me get this straight. The people that are looking, or no, Department of Energy. And he says, the people that are looking for money from you are hiring you to come pay you to come speak at their conference. And he's like, well, yeah. And he's like, you don't see a problem with that? Like, you're the guy that gives the government money out. And he's like, well, I mean, no, like, that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah, let's just take a look at this one, Jason, before we dive into
yeah,
stuff.
This is great.
Director of what?
Of the Loan Programs Office.
You're the director of the loan programs.
I love this guy. What a weasel.
For the federal government, Department of Energy. People who want to get loans from the government are paying to see you, and you think that that's fine? I didn't understand your answer to the ranking member or to the chairman. Did you say, so you do attend dinners with industry leaders where they pay to see you speak? Was that a yes or a no? I didn't hear.
No, I attend many events, some of which I'm invited to speak at.
And they don't pay. They don't pay.
And many don't pay, and some are like paid conferences and others. But one of the things.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait. That was a yes and a no.
That was too good not to play today.
Oh my! This is exactly what we're dealing with. So this clown from the Department of Energy gets paid to go speak at conferences from the people that are looking to get money from him.
And it's not even a secret. But how is that okay?
This was covered in a U.S. Senate hearing. Now, how is this not the lead story on the news program? Wait. The Department of Energy has these guys that are getting paid by the people they're giving money to. And like, you don't see the government corruption in this. It's just,
and that fool knew what was happening. That's why he answered yes and no. Well, I attend some that aren't paid. And then he finally admits to Holly, yeah, I do go to other ones that pay me. Like, he knows the game exactly. He knows what he's revealing in this sentence. It doesn't matter. Nothing's going to change. Jason, I do remember in 2008, there was a presidential candidate that promised to get money out and lobbyists out of D.C. I don't remember if that campaign promise came true or not.
Yeah, not quite. Not
Here's
quite.
a good question from William here. So does he get to pocket the money paid to speak? Or as a government employee, does that money go into the government's pockets? William, I hate to break it to you, but this guy is getting paid to speak, and that is his money. He's speaking as a private citizen in those events, despite getting paid as a government employee. As if the video weren't bad enough, I think answering William's question makes it that much worse.
Yeah. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, William. Like, it's even worse with your members of Congress. But yeah, so we have an unelected bureaucrat that is working for the Department of Energy, which Joe Biden has given trillions of dollars to the Department of Energy to give to Green New Deal companies, electric battery companies or electric car companies that are all losing a ton of money. And they're only surviving from government grants. So these companies take money and say, hey, Mr. Guy who gives out these grants and these loans, you call them loans, but they end up being forgiven a lot of times. So they're not really a loan. It's like when you loan your kid $20 and you're like, I'm never going to get that money back. And then that guy comes back and he gets paid from the same people that he's granting money to. It's pure corruption. So, Todd, where do we start today? Do we start digging into the jobs numbers?
You want to do some jobs here? You want to talk about corruption here? I think the best leadoff for this is going to be a video of Joe Biden. This is going to be, this was a couple of weeks ago, I think, Jason, right when he's talking about the September jobs report. And so imagine you've got your president here. He's done one of the greatest economic recoveries in history because, we had the pandemic closures, and Joe Biden somehow got all those jobs back. He had such great policies that all the jobs came back. Thank you, Joe Biden. So let's take a look at him bragging about that, and then we can kind of dig into the numbers a little bit more.
On-farm payrolls increased by 336,000.
This morning we learned the economy created 336,000 jobs in September alone. That means since I've taken office, we've created 13.9 million new jobs. You heard me say it before, I'm going to keep saying it. My dad had an expression. He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. And
well, thanks, Joe Biden. You created 13 million jobs since you came into office.
Yeah, remarkable. And it's funny, that jobs report, I was tweeting about that, and I think we'll get to some of those numbers. That came out 2 Fridays ago. And I'm like, 336,000 jobs. Holy crap. This is astounding. And every news media outlet ran with it. Now, for a little background on me, I used to work in corporate America. And I'm familiar with looking at basic financial reports and processing things like that. And, and frankly, anybody with a brain can look at these things and read it. So Todd, what happens when we start peeling back the jobs report?
I'm going to read from your tweet here. And Jason, it was a little too long. It had too much good information to make it on the screen here. It didn't quite all fit here, but let me just read some of the highlights here. So you talk about Biden bragging that we had an unemployment rate at 3.8% in September, which is, it's a good number. So thanks, Joe Biden. He says he added 336 new jobs just in that month alone here. That gives you pause, Jason, you ask in your tweet, but the unemployment rate is the same, even though we added hundreds of thousands of jobs. Should that unemployment rate go down a little bit more? There's a few things Joe Biden omitted from his speech here. The first of which is not inconsequential. 5.5 million people are not on that figure here as unemployment because they're not actively looking for a job anymore. So one of the first things the government does when they tell you 3.8% are unemployed, that's because they're not even counting the people that have given up, aren't currently looking for a job, are doing quite well, getting welfare benefits or other government program monies. So why would they cut that loose? If they're going to go get a job, they lose their bennies. So they're certainly not going to give that part up. So that's one big thing that Joe Biden decided not to share with us. There's millions of people that have given up, aren't looking, have lots of reasons to not go get a job. So there's that. You also talk about 151,000 of those jobs that Biden bragged about, so nearly half, are simply part-time jobs. And of that 151,000, Jason, 132,000 are second jobs. These are not the primary income sources for people, but a third of all new jobs added were folks that needed a second job to make ends meet.
Yeah, it's funny. So like as Todd's going through and I shared my tweet in the comments, like I just pulled up the report and the first few things are, well, the unemployment rate didn't change. Well, that's weird. 300,000 jobs. And then I saw the part-time jobs and it was 151,000. And then you got to dig into the reports and go, well, how many of those? So 130,000 Americans in the month of September needed to go get a freaking part-time job. 130,000 Americans. And how is that not the headline? 130,000 people needed to go get second jobs. Todd, what else did we learn in the jobs report?
Well, Jason, if you had to guess, and you've kind of already figured out the numbers here, I wonder if our audience wants us to take a stab. How many of those new jobs were government jobs? And again, we talk about those nice little welfare kickbacks. We talk about other government bennies here. And so when you add jobs, you're assuming right away, like that must be private sector. I must be going to Walmart, Dollar Tree, McDonald's, corporate America. I'm out there in the private workforce. No. Nearly a quarter of all those jobs were government positions. So yeah, Joe Biden hired you,
jobs.
But now Joe taxpayer, you and me, Jason, we just gave 22% of those new job seekers basically our tax dollars.
And I think most people watching this show will know our position is the federal government is too large by a third. You know what I mean? And we would like if you're working a federal job, God love you. I hope you're doing something that's needed. But the federal government is the largest employer in the history of Earth, and it shouldn't be that. So,
I think Jason, specifically the DoD, right? The Department of Defense specifically is the largest employer in the world. I think they have how many millions of people on that payroll? Just the Department of Defense.
It's insane. So you think about it. So first you say, okay, 130,000 people needed to get second jobs. That should be a headline. That should be spinning all over. Then the second thing is 72,000 jobs were new federal government jobs. Those are unsustainable. Those are not producers for the economy. And I mean, God love the people that are doing those jobs, but that is not economic growth. So now we're up to 225,000 jobs of the 300 and some thousand that they're bragging about. If we had a real media, they would be tearing this apart and they'd be saying these numbers are god awful.
And Jason, we're not even done yet. Do you know why we added, I'm going to say so many jobs in air quotes? That's because the month prior, we had gone down 25,000 positions for the private sector. And so August, we see a tank. September, they come back, so they celebrate that, but they didn't want to mention all the jobs that got lost in small businesses because of small businesses having to close down, lay people off in this economy. And then here they come right around. And again, if you're taking a government job, I was in the public sector my whole life as an educator. I was a teacher, assistant principal. I got tax dollars from everyone else to pay my salary, so I get it. Nothing against those people, but how are you really a contributor in the economy and society if you're just leeching off the taxpayer too at the same time?
Well, right, and it's fascinating that you say that. So what they were talking about too is there was a transportation company that went out of business, and they cost 25,000 jobs. And then those jobs got absorbed. Many of them got absorbed by other transportation companies who were picking up the contracts and whatnot. So it was kind of like the COVID thing when Joe Biden talks about adding 13 billion jobs. It's not that he added jobs. It's that jobs that went away during COVID that we gave stimulus money to so that they would be able to hire people back. They just simply hired people back. And that was the thing.
Jason, we got a comment from Linda who says, applause, good podcast, guys. Thank you, Linda, for following along. Again, this podcast is, as much as Jason and I enjoy doing it, this is really to get information out there for folks. Glad you find some things informational, helpful for you all. And again, like Jason shared at the onset of the podcast here, if you find this information useful, helpful, enlightening, we encourage you to share with your family, your friends, and especially family and friends that aren't necessarily inclined to listen to alternative media. If they're stuck in the CNN, MSNBC cycle, heck, even Fox News cycle at this point, you're not getting covered the same way that you're going to get information out here. And so we appreciate you following along. Thanks, Linda, for the comment and the shout out. And again, if you like our work, you can subscribe, you can share. That's the best way to get this information out there and help us.
Yeah, and it's awesome for us when we see people like what we do, because like I say, we were just two dudes who were just pissed off about what was happening. And everybody says, what can I do to help wake people up or to help get people to see? And everything's so right versus left. Like, I love this. I hate that. It's Democrats. It's Republicans. Guys, we're all getting screwed by the government, and they're destroying the country. So because of that, we need to do whatever we can to help spread real information, which is what we're trying to do in the jobs report. Todd, what's the last thing we got to go through in the jobs report? This one really blew me away.
I'm scrolling through your tweet here, Jason. You're putting me on the spot right now as I'm trying to look at that one more time.
I'll go through it. I'll go through it. So anyways, so we talked about 73,000 were government jobs. We talked about 130,000 were people needing to get second jobs. So then I'm looking, there's still a big packet of other jobs. And you had to go into the demographic reports and figure out what the categories were. And it turned out that the other big category of growth in jobs are people that are not from America.
You don't say.
Illegal immigrants were the other largest job growth category. And it said, oh gosh, I gotta find where the exact quote was. It talked about there were people that it was 130,000 people were illegal immigrants that got jobs. So to put this jobs report in perspective, if we had an honest media, they would say thing one, the honest media, like 130,000 people need to get second jobs. We continued expanding the federal government by 72,000 jobs, and 130,000 jobs were given to illegal immigrants. Are you kidding me?
I'm giving some pause there. If you're not outraged by that, you should be. I want that to sink in a little bit. So, A, we have a manipulative president in media. And then when you get into the actual numbers, it's not even that much better, right? Like, it's still outrageous because once you understand what's really happening, it doesn't make the lies go away. It just makes it worse that they're hiding it. And it makes it worse that that's our reality.
Right. Yeah. So jobs report, like this came out a couple weeks ago. This just really got me fired up because once again, the government's lying to you. Now, the other thing we're going to talk about, Todd, what's our next topic we're going into?
So we're going to segue into food prices. Jason, you and I covered this a little bit in previous episodes. We have a Substack on there about how CPI specifically is just a gigantic con, the way they factor in numbers, because if anyone's gone out to the grocery store, I got a bunch of food prices up here just as one example, or you've tried to go get a new car. We have some housing data that we're going to show up next year. But if you're in the housing market right now trying to sell or buy, you are certainly seeing a different world than what the government and the media are telling you about now. CPI is low. Inflation, we've got it down to 3% or whatever number they're making up for the day is. That's certainly not the reality. And so anyone that's gone to the grocery store knows firsthand what it costs in their market here. This is just kind of a generalized version of we're looking at sugar, we're looking at apple juice, we're looking at ground beef. These are pretty much staples in everyone's household. And you can see how all of these increases are anywhere in the range of 114%. I think this is year over year. This might be Biden's administration. So within the last couple of years, you are paying double, for lack of a better word, double in some sense of the basic necessities that you need in your kitchen.
Well, and it's interesting, and shout out to Will who wrote a good piece. I shared it in the comments on our Substack where they were talking about the CPI. Now, to use the NFL example I started with a little while ago, like people understand, they hear the term inflation, and to most people, they say inflation means things cost more. Like people understand. Some people understand all how the calculation goes into it and they go deep dive in it. And Will wrote a great piece on that talking about it. CPI is called the Consumer Price Index. And what the Consumer Price Index is, seeing Burkina, I haven't had
if you filled up your car, you know what's going on too. Exactly.
Right. So Todd brought this graphic up. So, use my wife and I as an example. We're empty nesters. We go to the grocery store every couple weeks. We buy kind of the same stuff. People buy, same brand fruit or, cereal or milk or whatever you buy. And our grocery bill used to be like, a couple $100 for every 2 weeks when you figure in all your toiletries and household stuff. Now that grocery bill is like $350. And then you see these inflation numbers where they come out and they say, hey, your inflation's up 3%. And like logically you say, wait a second, my grocery bill's up 30 frickin' %. And how is it that you guys can say that it's up 3%? And that's what Todd's talking about here. And I'm gonna give you an example here in a sec. But so pound of turkey breast went from 314 to 672. Pound of butter went from 298 to 368. Loaf of Sara Lee bread went from $2.68 to $3.46. That's a 29% increase. So you're saying to yourself, how do they lie to me? How do they use the line that we used earlier when I said the Vikings have a perfect Super Bowl record. And for that, I'm going to explain Ken's blue cheese chunky dressing. This is a Minnesota staple. My wife and I love blue cheese dressing. We dip stuff in it. We put it on salads. We don't eat many salads, but we use it to dip stuff in. How they do it with CPI is Ken's, which is a little fancier, has delicious chunks of blue cheese in it. This jug used to cost about $3.50, $4. This now costs $7. So and maybe they had some cost increases or that kind of thing too. So the price is nearly double, but the inflation's only 3%, I'm told. Well, how they factor that out, and Will breaks it down in the article, is they say, well, just because you used to get Ken's for $4 and now it costs you $8, you can buy generic blue cheese for $4 still. Costs you $4.25. So even though it's not the same blue cheese, you can still buy blue cheese dressing. It's not nearly as good, and the blue cheese dressing you'd like is double the price, but you can still get it, and it costs about the same. That's how they call it a 3% increase, which is truly remarkable.
Yeah, Rebecca writes to that point, I'm a retired senior, and us seniors are screwed if they keep this up. Absolutely. If you're on a fixed income, especially here, and we talked about Social Security, guess what? Social Security cost of living is adjusted according to the official CPI number. So Rebecca, you're going to get that tidy 3% Social Security raise when they adjust it. And guess what? You're still going to use that 3% raise to pay for the 50% spike in groceries. Yeah, absolutely. You're getting hosed in this whole deal.
Well, and actually, like Todd made an important point, Rebecca, and thanks for listening and commenting. You, as somebody on Social Security, are getting doubly screwed. Okay. And let's just really drill that home. One, you might say, you know what? I don't want to go with generic blue cheese. I like Ken's blue cheese. I still want to get that. And so now, even though my cost of food really went up 40, 50, 100% for the product I like, the government factors, and so you're going to have less money to spend, but the government's going to factor your Social Security increase on the bullcrap number that says, well, no, you can just switch to generic blue cheese. So your increase in Social Security, which we broke down on a previous podcast, is based on their fictitious number of their CPI increase, which they can say as long as they're still maybe you don't buy Charlene toilet paper. Maybe you get generic toilet paper now. Maybe you get industrial one ply. And that's why it only went up 3%. Now, I don't know about you. I ain't never using the industrial one ply. Like, things are going to have to get really bad for me to
I quit my job because that's all they stocked in the bathroom, Jason.
Oh my God. Yeah. Is there anything worse than industrial one ply, Todd?
I'm trying. Joe Biden? I don't know. You're putting me on the spot again.
Right.
Jason, the point about inflation, though, can I jump in here really fast? I think this is an important point, too. When we talk about inflation, if you recall the narrative since Biden took office, we talked about how inflation was transitory when it was 9%. We all knew it was a lot higher than 9%, but even that's a scary number. So it's transitory. It'll come back down. Just remember that when inflation was at 9 and 10% officially, and they said it was transitory, they didn't mean that all prices were going to revert back to pre-transitory inflation numbers. That 9 and 10% there was a new permanent, that was the new baseline. Inflation doesn't go backwards. So now that they got it down to 3%, that doesn't mean that we're back to where we were or prices are going to get steady. That just means you have a new baseline that is then 10% higher, the new 3% higher. Everything is going to continue going up here. And so they tried to make you feel better about the fact that, it won't be here very long. But guess what? Too late. That new price is baked into what you're paying.
Yeah, and shout out to Margaret. She was talking. She said our bacon price chart might be a little off, but she says hers went up 50% from $3.50 to $7.99. And that's the important thing too. A lot of these prices, like, we're from Minnesota, so these are kind of Minnesota prices. There are some parts of the country that the increase in price is even more dramatic. Yeah, William hits the nail on the head. Industrial one ply equals John Wayne paper, rough and tough, and don't take bleep off no one. Is that not the truth, William?
William's on fire today. I'm going to pop up another comment from William. And again, thanks for following along. Love the comments here. And again, if you have anything you'd like us to cover, drop that in the comment section as well for future episodes here. But William asked the question, I think somewhat rhetorically, with this increase, do the farmers benefit? Do the producers benefit? Does the little guy benefit? I think we all know the answer to that question, unfortunately. This money is, if you're paying double for bacon, you're not necessarily going to see the farmers reap that double benefit themselves. Now, this is baked into the entire processing. So no, your farmers aren't getting rich off the $8 bacon at this point.
Well, and it's this vicious circle. So if you're a farmer, and we're from Minnesota, we know farmers. By the way, we love farmers. Farmers are doing God's work. They are paying more for feed. They're paying more for fuel. They're paying more for their production costs. So their margin is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So in some cases too, even if they're seeing higher prices when they sell a side of bacon or a side of pork, like the cost of producing that pork went way outspaced based on what they were going to what they're going to get on it in the long run here.
All right, Jason, I'm going to use this opportunity to segue to our next part. We have some credit card debt to go over. We still have to get into housing prices, but Rebecca wants to know, are you going to cover anything that they're teaching in schools? That's going to be entire podcasts, entire Substacks. Rebecca, I do just have one story, though. Jason, I don't know if I've shared this one before. So a couple years ago, I was an assistant principal in an elementary school here in the Twin Cities area, first ring suburb. You can imagine the demographics there. And again, kids are great. I have no issue. I know they're trying to divide us all on race there. I work with predominantly Black, Asian, and Hispanic kids. They were great for the most part. You encounter some more challenges in some of those communities there. But we had one second grade teacher get punched in the face by her student. He didn't like what was going on, so just pow. She had the whole black eye thing going on. You can't suspend kids in Minnesota. They just passed a new law. If you're under third grade, you're not allowed to be suspended. You got to stay in school. And so we had this little guy sent back to the classroom, and the teacher had to have a conversation with him about what he did wrong. You can imagine the teacher's frustration. You can imagine my frustration. I'm hamstrung by, we're run entirely by Democrats, House, Senate, governor. Minnesota politically is wayward. They're struggling. So if you think California is bad, Minnesota's right up there with them. But I had to facilitate a conversation with a teacher that had just gotten a black eye from this little guy. Couldn't suspend him. You talk to the family. That's not very helpful usually in those situations. And then that little guy, since he couldn't go back to the classroom right away, got to sit in the principal's office and just kind of hang out for a week because we did an in-school suspension. You can't even call it that, but that's basically what happened. It's unbelievable what's happening out there. And that doesn't even cover what they're teaching, but just think about the interaction with teachers, the lack of respect going on there. But I just got to point out, black eye from a student. Nothing happened. The teacher had to welcome him back and give him a hug and say, I forgive you. Completely despicable stuff going on there.
Well, and I got to say, too, folks watching, do me a favor, drop a comment for Todd. And I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. I met Todd a couple years ago. He was writing a conservative blog, the Blue State Conservative. And he was
now defunct. You can't visit it, just FYI.
Yeah, now defunct. And he was doing it anonymously because he couldn't talk about stuff that was going on in his schools or his political values. So Todd actually started a Twitter account too, and we started working together on the American Tribune. And Todd was part of my inspiration for the business that we launched with the American Tribune and Freedom from the Press. Here was a guy who, just for his, and we're not talking crazy values, but just for his own conservative values, he was tweeting about things like, can we quit spending a bunch of money in the government? And he was getting pushback from people he worked with. Like, do they know you're saying this stuff? And you think about how terrifying that is. And he started, I've heard stories about schools and that, and it was just remarkable. And one thing I've been pushing Todd to do, a little behind the scenes here, I think Todd needs to start telling those stories about the education system. The awful things they're teaching our kids. The fact that in Minnesota, if your kid's gender transitioning, as a parent, they cannot even tell you. You can drop off your son, Bobby, at school, and Bobby goes into the bathroom and puts on a dress and is called Rebecca. And then when you pick up Bobby at the end of the school day, you don't know that he was Rebecca all day. They're letting that in Minnesota. And if Todd is a principal, had a teacher who told a parent, by the way, did you know Bobby's walking around in a dress all day? That teacher would get disciplined. And so I've been pushing Todd on this. So
Jason,
thank you
permission to
guys
tell
for bringing
two
it
more
up.
stories related to what you just brought up there. So again, I'm in the same school here. We have a student in 3rd grade come out to one of our gifted and talented teachers. Again, one of these made up positions in education. They're not in direct contact with kids, but they get their nice little teacher salary and benefits from the union and all that. Student comes out to the teacher saying, I'm not actually a girl. I feel like I'm a boy. And in the course of those conversations,
what grade was this?
3rd grade. We have a 9-year-old. In the course of conversations with this teacher, the child's classroom teacher, every teacher made the comment that the parents will not accept. This was a Hispanic student. They derided the family for saying they're not going to accept this. And so we need to be really careful how we message it to the family. Can't stress enough. There are a lot of good teachers out there. I'm going to speak generally, but the education system hates you as a parent. They hate that you have values. They especially hate that you have values different from their own. And they saw this family as the bad guy because they wouldn't accept this child for who they really were. I'm using the phraseology of public education there. It's just a disaster. And I do want one more story really fast, Jason. You and I have to get back into the lies about housing, income, and all these other things here. When I was in Minneapolis for a year, if you've looked at the facts, for the most part, Black students are the ones that are getting in fights, getting suspended. Variety of reasons. We had a fight rate breakout among a couple of Asian students, and the administration immediately, and not ironically, they celebrated that because that was going to get their numbers more in line with the school's demographics. So rather than ask the question of, are the kids okay? Rather than express relief that, okay, there was a fight, but none of the kids got hurt. They celebrated the fact that Asians got in a fight because it wasn't going to reflect so poorly on them because it wasn't another group of Black kids. You can't make this up. I'm listening to this as just, again, someone that doesn't align with any of the values or beliefs in public education. And they're saying this with a straight face and just happy that they could report back to the school district, like, look at this. Now we have X amount of Black kids in fights, X amount of Asian kids in fights. That's going to make us look better. And look how much equity we're promoting in school. Because now, it doesn't look like only Black kids are getting in fights there. So it's, Marilyn, she wants to know a little bit more there. That wasn't the focus of the show. Happy to go into that. I have stories all day for y'all here. And that's just my one experience. This doesn't account for everything else. You can go to Libs at TikTok on Twitter. Every day she's pushing things out that are just frightening and scary, and all the more reason to pull your kids out of public schools. But we'll definitely get into that a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the dovetail, folks. Thanks for encouraging Todd. Like I say, I've been giving him grief that is a story we need to tell. Because if American citizens knew what's happening in schools, they would just be so enraged.
All right,
so Todd,
Jason,
where do we travel next?
Let's get back into some finances here. So again, just some frightening information that you're not going to see. Well, this is on CNBC, so credit to that here. But credit card users paid nearly $164 billion in fees, interest fees in 2022 alone. And then analysts are saying that it's going to get a little bit worse here. And so again, here's Joe Biden. Let's go back to the video we played. He says, things are great. Unemployment is low. I created all these new jobs here. And then Wall Street Silver, another great follow on Twitter, writes, it's probably going to get worse for a while before it gets better. And then he says what we're all thinking. I don't think we're being told the truth about true economic data like inflation or job numbers. Yeah, no kidding. Americans are getting pinched. We had our comment earlier about I'm on Social Security. I'm on a fixed income. It's getting really tight. Guess what? If you don't have cash in your pocket or in the bank, you're going to swipe your credit card and then hopefully make it to next month to pay those bills off. As we're seeing here in this headline, $164 billion in fees and interest. That tells me that we're not able to pay those bills anymore.
Yeah. And so, folks, hopefully you're starting to see a pattern emerge. And hopefully some of this is clicking and you go, God, I know the government was lying to me. So they're lying about the jobs numbers. They're lying about inflation. By the way, they're screwing seniors over on the inflation. And now you're seeing, okay, these credit card things. Well, this is terrifying. So what other numbers are terrifying?
Let's pop this one up here. Here's another headline. This is Americans filed more than 39,000 bankruptcy cases in August. I'm going to highlight just in 1 month, 39,000 bankruptcy cases of just everyday Americans, which is an 18% increase from the same point last year. Credit card data doesn't look good. So here's the next step, right? You have your credit card bills you can't pay anymore. At some point, you just can't pay any of the bills. You're filing for bankruptcy here. I don't see Joe Biden celebrating this data or even pointing this data out. And then, Jason, if you want to comment on that, otherwise,
I think let's just keep going.
So let's talk housing. when you buy a house, that's most likely the most expensive debt you're ever going to get into. Student loans, separate issue here. But when you buy a house, that's everyone's most expensive asset they have, liability that they have. I know it's kind of hard to read here if you're watching online here. This stretches back a couple of years, but you can see in the early 1990s, this is the Case Shiller. This is from the Fed here in St. Louis, but under $80,000 to go buy a house. Jason, that number, if you can watch the graph, I mean, we all know the direction it's headed, but that thing is absolutely skyrocketed to basically $350,000. And you might be asking, what have incomes done in that same time, right? So we know the housing market is getting really tight out there. If you're trying to buy your first home, good luck. There's no such thing as a starter house anymore.
Well, and it's interesting as you break down some of these housing price numbers, you're seeing a huge increase in housing prices. And now for those of us that are older, it's not as big a deal, right? We bought our house, we've lived in our house. But now at some point you want to think about your kids and you want to go, okay, these guys going into the market, like we like to make fun of young kids and they don't work and they got blue hair or whatever. But like I've got 3 kids, 2 step kids and my own, and like they're all good, hardworking kids. And I want them to be able to own a house. I want them to be able to experience the American dream. And if you look, that cost of a starter house is now, quadruple what it used to be just 10, 15 years ago. So how are these poor kids ever going to buy a house?
Yeah, and good luck. And so I pulled this off a statistic here. This is income, the ratio of your income to the housing prices. This goes back a decade. So it would have been even friendlier if we're going back to the original Fed chart that we had that goes back to the late 80s, early 90s here. At this point, housing prices have exceeded your income. We had hit almost 140%. In other words, it's unsustainable. People simply aren't making money to be able to afford the houses that they're trying to move into now.
It is terrifying. And Todd, do you have interest rates too? Oh yeah, here we go.
Well, I think I read that they just crossed 8%. And again, it's going to vary market to market here. But if you're looking at 8% down now on a 30-year, $350,000 home, I mean, you're paying more than $1,000. I think the number was just if you had bought a home last year. People don't have an extra $1,000 in their pockets just to pay the mortgage every month. Unusual Whales, this is on Twitter as well. Just a couple of recent comments from this account. I'm just going to read them here in case you're following on audio. The median price of an existing home in the U.S. rose nearly 53% from $266,000 in January 2020 to $407,000 in August 2023. And again, you talk about the increase in prices here. This has happened dramatically, as everybody knows, in just the last couple of years. The other tweet says the U.S. median down payment increased 11% year over year in the third quarter to $30,000, which is the highest ever. So again, if you're trying to go out and buy your new home, you're putting down $30,000 in cash. And Jason, we're expecting people to do that are filing bankruptcy at record numbers. We're expecting people to do that have all of this credit card debt. Where are they going to come up with $30,000?
And this is where you really want to break into what the lies are being told, because your political class is standing up there and they're saying, life's great, the economy's good, look at all these jobs. And average normal humans can look at this stuff going on there and go, my blue cheese is costing me twice as much. I'm on Social Security. If you're on Social Security and you got kids and grandkids, like they can't buy a house. A buddy of mine's a realtor. And even if you bought the same $300,000 house that you would have bought 5 years ago, like you get a lot less house now, but your payment is about $800 more a month because of the interest rates being so high. Oh,
and Jason, Marilyn. I love Marilyn's comment. Yeah, Marilyn, thanks so much for following along here. We've seen a couple comments coming through to you here. So I do want to address this point. So Marilyn writes, sorry guys, but I remember 9 to 13% in the 80s. Yep, my dad got a 15% mortgage in the 80s when we were growing up here. But I think it's important to highlight some of the differences. So I'm going to pop this graph back up here really fast, Marilyn, as we kind of go through this comment here. Get what you're saying. Interest rates were a lot higher back then, but a couple things have changed dramatically that make these cases very different. First off, we were at 2% mortgage rates. I had someone lock in a 2.25% for 30 years in 2020. So we've never seen rates jump up this high, this fast before. So that's part of the thing, because a couple years ago, I could lock in 3 or 4%. Now I'm getting 8%. So I'm paying double in just a year or two. So that's not sustainable growth. That is far exceeding what happened in the 80s. The other piece to remember here, too, is that home prices in the 80s, when they were that much lower, you could buy a home on one person's income. Your income relative to the cost of a house made it a lot more manageable. Now, with incomes what they are and what housing prices what they are, it's not really apples to apples because I'm paying so much more of my income, or I'm going to be expected to pay so much more of my income on that new interest rate. And so when we had the chart here, let me pop up the housing chart one more time here. So when we're looking at the late 80s, we had the median income or the median house price around $80,000. Now it's up to $350,000. Incomes have not risen at the same rate here. And so totally get Marilyn's point. I hear this a lot here, especially from the older generation that locked in 10%, 12% on their house. But the financial situation is just not the same anymore. You're paying way more for the house. Your incomes have not kept up with that. So while I appreciate the comment here, Marilyn, don't want to put you on the spot here. I love the comment here, but I do think it's important to point out some of the key differences relative from the 80s and then today.
Yeah, and Todd, can I break in with something quick too?
Hop right in.
All right. Hey folks, I would like to announce too, for those who haven't noticed, Todd and I are big coffee drinkers. We love coffee. And we should have started.
Hey, where's your branded mug, Jason?
I need my branded mug.
Actually,
Todd, you're going to need the right branded mug because the Freedom from the Press podcast has our first official sponsor, which is Split Rock Coffee. For those who don't know, and I'll drop a link to their website in the chat. I met Paul, who's the owner. Paul and Ron are the owners of Split Rock Coffee. They're a coffee company based out of Minnesota. They're disabled vets, and they work with their own company, employing disabled vets, doing work for disabled vet companies. And we've been doing some work with them on their website. And this is kind of big because Todd is now an official media personality because we have promo code Todd10 to get you 10% off your Split Rock Coffee order. So Todd, who nobody knew about a couple months ago, he was never a public personality. He even had to take his personal profile off his Twitter page so he didn't get fired from his job. You can go to splitrockcoffee.com. Their breakfast blend, delicious. And it's low acid coffee too. So it's coffee you can drink all day. I dropped the link in the chat, but you can go on there and you can use promo code Todd10 for your savings, and it'll totally make Todd's day.
I think you've made my entire week, month, year, whatever it is, Jason. I feel like I finally became a promo code. I tried to brag to my wife about this, and I don't think she was as impressed as I was hoping she would have been, or as happy as I am. But yep, I am a promo code now. Go to splitrockcoffee.com. Local Minnesota coffee from us. It's small business owned. It's veteran owned, disabled veteran owned. All the right stuff. You're buying coffee from people that support your values. You don't need to go over to Black Rifle anymore that pretends to be conservative, is not. Certainly don't give your money to Folgers and Maxwell House and all those things. But Split Rock Coffee, that's what I'm drinking right now. I don't have a Split Rock mug, but I got my tap mug.
Yeah, I see. The one thing I will say with the Split Rock mug is it's like a baby size mug. So Paul, if you're watching, like we need to get the real mug because some of us are real coffee drinkers and we drink like a gallon at a time.
But Jason, they do offer that mug in one of their gift packages. You can get a mug and two bags of coffee for a great deal right now. So go check it out.
Yeah, $29.99 for that. It's spectacular. So hey, back to what we're talking about. Do we travel to Insurrection, Todd?
I think we have to here, and we have some videos here that I'm just going to let play for themselves, and then we'll kind of talk about it here. But you know, if you were following the news at all, and especially if you were on Twitter, there was a lot of noise at the U.S. Capitol this last week. Jason, what happened at the Capitol?
This week, for those who didn't see, the Capitol was taken. First, Rashida Tlaib goes out, gives this inflammatory speech. She's very pro-Palestine. And then those people went in and took over the Capitol building. And Todd, I was under the impression that if you take over the Capitol like this, with protesters, with like disrupting what's happening. Now, this is in the Cannon building. This isn't in the regular House building, but this is completely disrupting the thing. There's also other videos that we probably won't play on here that shows them getting into physical altercation with police. Todd, I was told that this is insurrection. Was I not?
I was told that if you stop proceedings in Congress, if they're trying to vote on something, and you interrupt them and you go into the Capitol building and you have to halt the vote, that is an insurrection. And look, those aren't even my words, Jason. Let's see what Pelosi had to say about it.
A year ago, the Capitol and those who work within it were targeted in a violent insurrection that sought to undermine democracy. Congress was
You
able
undermine democracy.
to defeat the insurrection, to return to the Capitol that same night to ensure that the peaceful transfer of power took place. 1 year later, this sacred space where members legislate, children learn,
sacred.
visitors are welcomed, was defiled and damaged. We know that. As we reflect on that darkest day, we remember that the insurrection sought not only to attack the building, but to undermine democracy itself.
Oh. Look, these aren't my words. These aren't our rules anymore, Jason. Nancy Pelosi is telling us herself, if you stop a vote from happening, if you go into the Capitol, that's an insurrection. She said it twice, and you're undermining democracy if you do that.
Yeah, and actually just breaking this morning too, and we didn't have a chance to pull the video together. Hakeem Jeffries, who is the Democrat choice for Speaker of the House, was giving a speech talking about how they should pick him because the Republicans can't get their act together and get Jim Jordan to be Speaker. And he was parroting these points about the insurrection at the Capitol and how Jim Jordan led an insurrection at the Capitol. That was this morning. And
Jason, can I cut you off there? Because I have Pelosi saying the exact same thing today. Should we hear it from them and not us?
Insurrection was rejected by the Republicans again as their candidate for Speaker. We've always wished the winning party well as they choose their leader. I've never, in the decades that I've been here, when we've had a speaker's race on our side or their side.
All right, I can't listen to Nancy anymore, but there she is. She called Jim Jordan insurrectionist years later after we've learned a lot more about what happened that day. But like you said, Hakeem Jeffries isn't letting it go. Pelosi's not letting it go. This is even after what happened this past week with the pro-Palestinian protesters. They are completely ignoring what happened. They're just going to stick to their narrative. Theme of the show is debunking government lies here, government untruths. But the fact that they can go out there, and I don't know if Pelosi can make other facial expressions anymore. So when I say that she's saying the straight face, I think that's the only choice that she has. They keep pushing this J6 insurrection narrative even after they watch their side go in and do the exact same thing.
And here's what's crazy is, yeah, Holly asked the question, what about what happened in the Cannon building? Was that not an insurrection? That's exactly our point. And insurrection, let's put in perspective what an insurrection is. Like, the Democrats can call insurrection whatever they want, but an insurrection is like you're trying to overthrow the government. By the way, insurrection is punishable by like death or life in prison. And so Democrats have watered that down to mean people that are protesting in the Capitol. But then remarkably, Cindy, you're right. She has we should share that Michael Jackson, Nancy Pelosi meme. I should find that.
Let me see if I can find it while you're talking.
Yeah. But anyways, it's Rashida Tlaib can take over the government building. They can protest. They can stop all business from happening. And they aren't even going to get called out by these same people that are 3 years later still calling Jim Jordan an insurrectionist. And, you know, one thing we talk about, and like personally, Todd and I, we make no secret about it. We're Trump voters. We're going to vote for Trump again. But what happened on January 6th was an insurrection. It was a standard political protest that got out of hand. Some people deserve to get punished. I just saw a report from a January 6er. He's been in jail 1,000 days without a trial. 1,000 days. He didn't fight at the barricades. He went into the Capitol and was wandering around. And it's truly remarkable that but once again, this is that media lying. They're letting these Democrats say this is an insurrection. They're letting none of these Democrats, Nancy Pelosi wasn't asked, what do you think about Rashida Tlaib telling people to go in and take over the Capitol? And then they did it. Like, she's not getting asked those questions. She's not getting pushed back on that. It's truly, truly remarkable.
And Jason, there's more to discuss here, but there were two more clips I wanted to show side by side as we go through government lies here. I think this is icing on the cake for our show today. I think we've all seen this clip, so I'm going to start here.
What's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Okay, remember what he just said, then we'll talk about it. This
I
is
know
Joe
we
Biden.
have our
Yes.
divisions at home. We have to get past them. We can't let petty, partisan, angry politics get in the way of our responsibilities as a great nation.
Well, that's a different Joe Biden. I think I mean that on a couple levels too, by the way, but that's quite a different tone.
Right. And so if you think about how Joe Biden, how they frame up the difference with MAGA Republicans, I mean, it's truly demonic what they're doing. And um, it, the fact that they can take such a large percentage of Americans who just want what's best for the country. We wanted a wall because we want secure borders. We wanted the government to tax less. We want a smaller federal government. We want people to have First Amendment and Second Amendment rights. Like these are all foundational principles. And yet now they call us like extremists. And you're getting to see what real extremists are. Go watch the videos of what's happening over in Israel with Hamas. Like those are extremists. And those folks are now, like we saw Black Lives Matter burn down cities and destroy things. Like we're from Minnesota, Minneapolis, what they did in that town was beyond disgusting.
And it's
But now
still
you're
burned
seeing
out.
it. What's that?
It's still burned out, by the way. Go
Yeah,
down to
no,
George
we should
Floyd
actually
Square.
do that sometime. Drive through and
We
film
should
it.
do a
Like,
live. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Go
go
on.
to George Floyd Square. See, it's
I don't
still
think we'd be
crap.
coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, now you see these folks that are doing these protests and these aren't people that have a different political opinion than you. Like a lot of these pro-Palestinian and Hamas, like Hamas is a terrorist regime that was elected by the Palestinians. Like that's their chosen government. And they have one of their sayings, we covered it on last week's episode, is from the river to the sea, which means they want to remove all Jews from the Jordan River to the sea. And like these are not nice people spending nice things. But meanwhile, if you wear a red hat and you say like, hey, I think Trump won the election, suddenly you are an extremist.
Yeah, and then notice the tone though in Joe Biden. Suddenly all those words he said, no, we need to come together right now because there's so much division out there. I hate to break it to you, Joe, but you are the one creating the division right now. The right is reacting to this. It is the left pushing the division. If it were up to us, I have no animus towards other people. My neighbor next door has a yard sign out. He voted for Governor Walz in Minnesota. He's going to vote for Joe Biden in 2024, whoever the Democrat nominee is, no matter what. I don't dislike him as a human being. He's a great neighbor. He's friendly to us. We go on pontoon rides together. But he buys this. And so he's someone that I would like to share our work with.
It's funny. I tell the story. A couple of my best friends, Gary, Jim, like they're people that voted for Joe Biden. And like we have different policy prescriptions sometimes. We have different things, but we don't hate each other. And that's why part of the theme is freedom from the press. What can we do to bring people together? And part of that is sharing the truth. So that's part of why we're going to ask you guys to do a favor, like go to our website, go to Split Rock Coffee. Those are great ways to support us. But the biggest thing anybody can do that's listening to this is just share it and share it with somebody that you don't politically agree with. And hopefully they open their brain. And Todd, do we end with the Scott Adams list?
We better pop this up there. This is a kind of a go-to for us. We've definitely had it up here before. And again, he always updates it now. So it's kind of hard to find the latest one because if you Google search, Scott Adams updated hoax quiz, like you're going to get a lot of different ones here. And again, you and I debunked this, I think, in our very first episode here. But think about all the lies you're getting told. Jason and I talked about a bunch today related to really important issues about your finances and economic situation. So your income, your housing, your food, all of these things that impact your day-to-day life here. But don't forget, we also talked about how the Democrats and media are pushing insurrection narratives. One day you're an extreme MAGA Republican. The next day we're all trying to come together if you're Joe Biden. And don't forget that the media pushed all of these outright lies about Donald Trump. And Jason, the more I look at this list, number 8, I'm not going to be able to get over here. Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. And I wish we had this clip here, but Leon Panetta was doing his rounds, and he was getting asked about, do you regret signing this? Or do you regret pulling people together to tell the American public that it was disinformation? To this day, he's not apologetic. Basically, the mission was so important to get rid of Donald Trump that he doesn't regret what he did, because even if the laptop was true, there's all these other lies about Donald Trump that need, take precedence. So pretty astounding stuff.
Yeah, and I will say one thing we always encourage people is like, don't take our word for it. We try to bring receipts. We try to show the facts. If you go on like our Substack, Will like cites different sources. And when we did Social Security, we referenced the charts. Every one of these things you see on this list has been a debunked hoax. So like, for example, the Gretchen Whitmer kidnap plot, where she was being kidnapped by crazy MAGA folks. Well, it turns out they were FBI agents. There was like 6 FBI agents with like 3 crazy dudes, and the FBI guys convinced the crazy dudes to say they were going to go kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. And like, there's court records on this. This isn't things we did. So for anybody who's like, I don't like Trump, like, look at this list, fact check us, go research that, go see these things and understand everything on that list that you were told that many of you are convinced, many people still believe, have been debunked and are no longer true. And then how much of the Trump hatred or the MAGA hatred is tied back into that?
I was just going to say, Jason, even though it's been debunked, the emotions don't go away so easily. So facts are kind of irrelevant at a certain point. You have a certain crowd of Americans that hate Donald Trump. That's never going to change, but they don't realize that their hate comes from the lies that they got told day after day of the entire Trump administration.
Yeah, truly, truly remarkable, folks. And the damage that the media did, transitioning it from, hey, we have different views of tax rates, to your violent insurrectionists. I saw Mark Dice did a thing the other day, and he was in a Democrat city, and he was asking people to sign a petition if Trump voters who thought the election was stolen should be thrown in jail, and he got thousands of signatures. Think of that. People are so brainwashed that they want their fellow citizens thrown in jail because they have a different view of the election.
Yeah, but that's the party of tolerance and the party of free speech. So
yeah,
wrap your head around that one.
Wrap your head around that. Well, we should button this up and get out of here,
Jason.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to give a shout out to Rebecca. She says, thank you, gentlemen, for your time and input. God bless you both. God bless you too, Rebecca. We're churchy around here. And hopefully if you've listened to the show and you've watched this, or however you do it, hopefully we brought a little joy to your life. Hopefully you'll go support some of our work. But most importantly, hopefully you share this, because part of why we do this is if we can just impact 10, 100, 1,000 people and get them to seeing the truth, that's going to spread. And if everybody watching this podcast shares this with 2 more people or 3 more people that see through these lies, that's how we're going to make a difference. And with that, Todd, I'll let you bring us home and close us out.
Again, can't say thank you enough. It's every viewer that makes the show possible. Jason and I here would be rambling to nobody if it weren't for you. So appreciate you following along. Love the comments today. It sparked some really good conversations that Jason and I didn't have planned, but glad we had them. So if there's anything you'd like to see in future episodes, again, drop a comment. Jason and I would love to do a little deep dive in that and share what we find out with y'all. Otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll catch you next Friday.
See you next Friday.